Hello there guys, what is going on? Daniel Childs back here again. Another hotel room. As you probably noticed in my last video, we're back in Brisbane now. And yeah, the World Cup knockouts are starting and the World Cup has been quite incredible, to be honest. And you know, if you're an England fan, it's starting to get a little bit more exciting because Germany are out, Brazil are out, USA haven't looked that good, but we could see more shocks that do include England. But so much Chelsea stuff as usual to get into in terms of transfer things, the good, the bad, and also Chelsea's owners holding talks to raise funds. We'll get into all of that in today's show, and as well Christopher Nkunku's injury scare. If you are new around here, please hit that like button, please hit that subscribe button. Thank you for all the support on the channel and the videos whilst I've been out here. Obviously my schedule's been quite intense, there's been so much travelling and I haven't been able to do regular videos and shows as I'd wanted to, but thank you once again for all of your support and kind comments on the show. You can also get the show as a podcast. I've been uploading them as well in audio form as well, so at SonOfChelsea, just on podcast, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, all of that stuff. Let's start with Michael Olise and Lewis Hall, because two players, Crystal Palace involved obviously. Firstly, Chelsea apparently have made a verbal offer of around 30 million euros for Olise. This is reported in certain places. We have heard Olise as a potential target. Kudos to from Ajax. We were speaking about these kind of extra attacking options that Chelsea could be looking at. And also the Athletic reporting recently in regards to Olise and interest from several places for him, that there may be a release clause in his contract of around £35 million. So this is one that I think is conflicting for me, because I really like the player. I really do. I think he is a really direct, ferocious winger. I think someone that quite clearly has an ambition to move up sort of the pecking order in football very quickly. I heard this about him as a player several years ago when he moved from Reading to Crystal Palace. And it's a shame that actually he has suffered some injury problems, because I think when he has been on the pitch and he has shown his quality, he looks like a very, very dangerous player, one that can only get better. I think Eze too at Crystal Palace, even though they've lost Wilfried Zaha, I think if they were to keep Olise and Eze, I think there is a real excitement that they could, you know, really have a decent season despite having some struggles in recent years. So I can understand why Chelsea would look at Olise, and I can understand absolutely why Olise would see Chelsea. This is a great chance for him to move to Chelsea, and for Chelsea it's just, you know, increasing the quality in the final third. So I think the potential of this deal makes a lot of sense. The only thing I think that goes against it for me, as I spoke about with Trevor Chalobah and Disasi, and kind of the Levi Colwill, Benoit Badiashile, Wesley Fofana in the centre-back position, is you have a lot of young players vying for limited spots in an area when they need, and a time in their career when they need minutes. We've bought Noni Madueke, for instance. We've even seen Raheem Sterling play on the right. We've seen, I believe, Mykhailo Mudryk, even though he favours the left, could maybe be used on the right too. Again, you're getting maybe into an area with Chelsea like we have had in the previous kind of few years, when you've got Christian Pulisic, Callum Hudson-Odoi, Timo Werner, Kai Havertz. You've got a bunch of players who need minutes, and naturally there becomes a bottleneck where not everyone can play, and then are you kind of blocking people's pathways, and actually you're left with players who are going to kind of feel quite stalled at Chelsea. I've kind of feel that Noni Madueke, I'm so excited by what I've seen from him, that I do think he is someone to put a lot of faith into. So Olise for me is not like, it's not that if he came in I wouldn't be excited, because he's a player that I think several Chelsea fans that I know have looked at, you know, him for recent years and thought this could be a really good signing, but that was before we signed Noni Madueke. So I'm kind of like, if we do sign Olise, I'll be happy. If we don't, I'll be interested to see what happens with Noni Madueke, because I think his development could go really far this year under Mauricio Pochettino. The other thing, of course, is Lewis Hall. It's belief Crystal Palace are working on the loan deal for him. I just want to give credit to the journalist that broke this story, Edmund Brack, who works for South London Press, London News Online, who broke this story in terms of Crystal Palace working for a loan deal. Whether this is involved in the Michael Olise negotiations, if there are, if that is serious, we're not sure. But I do think that for Lewis Hall, this would be an amazing loan. I think it's a bit of a shame, to be honest, because I would have liked to have kept Lewis Hall and just sell Mark Cucurella, and we could still sell Mark Cucurella and keep Ian Maatsen. I think for Lewis Hall, he absolutely deserves to be getting consistent minutes this season somewhere. And I would rather it be on loan to Crystal Palace, where we, of course, sent Conor Gallagher, sent Ruben Loftus-Cheek. I think it's a really good area and a really good place for him to get consistent minutes. I think not only will he be competing with Mitchell at left back there, but potentially under Roy Hodgson will get a midfield spot too and really show his talent. And then hopefully in a year's time, there'll be an opening for him at Chelsea. That's at least a hope. And as well, apparently Chelsea working on a long-term contract, as they do quite frequently with young players. So then we'll sign him up for a long-term deal before he goes on loan. So then there isn't that concern of him going on loan and then us, being in a really bad negotiating position where we have to sell him or like he sees, the path elsewhere. I just think that Lewis Hall is, really, really talented, and given what he did last season, needs to be getting consistent minutes this season. I think it's a loan that would make a lot of sense personally for him. I do understand why some Chelsea fans would be frustrated losing Lewis Hall, given if Mark Cucurella is sticking around. I understand that frustration 100%. Let's talk about Nkunku. Nazar Kinsella speaking for Evening Standard, saying that there is relief around Chelsea. But news signing labelled a major doubt for the opener against Liverpool. The news since that injury blow that we saw against Borussia Dortmund is relief because it's not as serious as first feared, but apparently the forward is still likely to miss the opening match against Liverpool on August the 13th, which, based on my Australian time, tomorrow will be a week till that game, so we're very close now. The France international limped off in the 22nd minute of Chelsea's final pre-season match against Dortmund after falling under a challenge from Mats Hummels. It's a blow, it really is. I do think, you look at opening start for Nkunku, he has had a really, really promising pre-season. He scored a couple of goals, he's looked really talented, I think he's looked really settled. And it's a big game against Liverpool. You want your best players available to make an impression, to really get the season going on a high. And Nkunku is arguably the biggest signing Chelsea have made, other than keeping Levi Colwill. I think that it's just a real shame, isn't it? Chelsea have just had some really rotten luck with injuries, but the hope is he can be back pretty quickly if he does miss the Liverpool game. And as well, I do think there are options in the squad for players to take their opportunity. Ones who have been good in pre-season, whether that is, you think of a free behind a striker, right, which we assume is going to be Nicholas Jackson against Liverpool, whether it is Mykhailo Mudryk, Conor Gallagher, Ian Maatsen, who's played further up the pitch. So it's not like there isn't players who could come in for Nkunku at least for one or two games that don't excite me. It's just for him to get his season up and running in the Premier League. Hopefully can be soon. Let's talk about Robert Sanchez, who's obviously basically signed at this point. They've announced Axel Disasi, which we spoke about the other day, not a signing that is exactly, making me that exciting about things, because I don't see it as a massive upgrade. But Robert Sanchez, 25 million, apparently 25 million with add-ons. I'm not as negative as everyone else about Robert Sanchez. I do think this is a player that, it seems to be, from a Chelsea point of view, there's been real revisionism over Brighton with Graham Potter that has just kind of baffled me, because the common, perception of Graham Potter and Brighton and what he did with a set of players before he joined Chelsea was overly positive. And then seemingly, because it went so wrong for him at Chelsea, everyone's had to go back in time and kind of revise that actually what he did with Brighton was awful and shouldn't be credited at all. Taking a team from relegation battle under Chris Hughton, playing really reactive football, to one that played some of the best football in the Premier League. It's just, and Sanchez as a goalkeeper was a part of that, and it's just weird to me. And I think Robert Sanchez, I think there needs to be context here that he is someone that, fell out with the manager. It wasn't a case of his form completely nosediving, but I don't think Sanchez is to the level of Andre Onana. It's just baffling to me Chelsea haven't gone in for him. And it's also baffling to me that Chelsea have we sold Edouard Mendy, who for me is a better goalkeeper than Kepa Arrizabalaga, and also probably a better keeper than Robert Sanchez. And we've now signed Robert Sanchez for more than we originally signed Edouard Mendy. Edouard Mendy, we spoke about this when he left earlier in the summer. I found the treatment of him really, really bizarre. Yes, he was struggling with form. Yes, maybe he had reached his peak, and that peak was only a limited period of time. But when we're thinking about, Kepa, when we're thinking about the goalkeeping options we have and how serious an area it is for Chelsea to resolve, I just think it's not an area of the squad that we have dealt with very well, in my opinion. And I still kind of think that Kepa, I was meaning to say this on the Dortmund review, that, again, there's just parts of his game that's just very hard to get round, and feel like they're going to cost Chelsea in key moments. So hopefully Sanchez, as someone who quite clearly is very adept with the ball at his feet, and I think is someone who's clearly going to be motivated to prove himself at a bigger club. Hopefully that proves to be a good motivator for him, but it's not exactly the massive upgrade I think many of us would have hoped for this summer. The final thing to speak about here is this kind of thing over Chelsea owners holding talks with Ares, I think it is, over raising funds. This is from the Financial Times. The Premier League club apparently is looking to upgrade stadium and emulate Manchester City's model by adding to a network of teams. It's obviously the multi-club model. Chelsea are also looking for further acquisitions after making its first move into the multi-club ownership in June with the purchase of Strasbourg. The other thing here is in terms of the stadium, and once again, was it April, May time we spoke about this story of Chelsea looking to either completely redevelop Stamford Bridge, which still seems like the more likely option, or move to Earls Court, which seemed out of the question a few years ago, but that development plan just hasn't moved forward at all since they knocked down the exhibition centre, which is, that's a long time ago. I think it was even pre-COVID they knocked that down. So it's been a long time, and I still, we spoke about this at the time, I still don't understand when I heard reports that there was this anti-Earls Court movement in terms of like fans being so against the idea of going to Earls Court, when the other option is if we redevelop Stamford Bridge, even if it is stand by stand, there's a likelihood of Chelsea having to move to, say, Wembley for an extended period of time. And personally, that doesn't fill me with a lot of joy, having to go to Wembley, because I just don't think it's a very good stadium. And I think, for Chelsea fans, obviously it radically alters our matchday experience. The thing with Earls Court, if you've been to Stamford Bridge, if you know the location of Stamford Bridge, if you know the way people usually get to Stamford Bridge, Earls Court, in terms of the tube station, is where a lot of people either arrive at Stamford Bridge or absolutely will leave Stamford Bridge and walk to Earls Court rather than Fulham Broadway. So it's an area of Stamford Bridge with Brompton Cemetery too that is very local to Stamford Bridge. I know that personally very well, and it would not alter the matchday experience radically. Sure, there would be some way where people, but even if people were like still going to the pubs they would near the Fulham Road where they go to Stamford Bridge, that the geography of it all means that I think you could still go to pubs close to Stamford Bridge and still go to Earls Court, and the distance wise it isn't like ridiculous. You could still keep a lot of the matchday rituals that you have, actually, because it's in a very local area. That's just the way it is in that part of London. So I think that there is a lot of benefit potentially to move to Earls Court, and maybe then you don't have that kind of fear of having to move out of Stamford Bridge for years and years and years, and the potential headaches they've had for a number of years of trying to redevelop Stamford Bridge. Listen, leaving Stamford Bridge is going to be an emotional thing if it ever was to come, and you suspect in Chelsea's history it will probably happen, or at least the likelihood is of it being majorly redeveloped or us having to be outside of Stamford Bridge. Yes, we can look at these very iconic grounds across world football. It's not the case that every big club has to move stadium. You look at Old Trafford, you look at Anfield, but then you also look at the Emirates, you also look at Tottenham's new stadium, you also look at the Allianz Stadium with Bayern Munich. There are examples in both ways of keeping what you already have, but then there are pitfalls to keeping what you have, because as we've seen with Old Trafford, with the lack of funding, that ground can be and has been deteriorating, and fans have been very frustrated about that. Liverpool, though, I think on the other end of the spectrum, have maintained and upgraded Anfield whilst keeping what makes Anfield special to Liverpool fans. intact, I think, in the best way possible. You'd like to think that Chelsea could have that, but London is a very different place. You go to a lot of stadiums, also out here in Australia, right? It's just Chelsea are in such a confined space in West London. Like it's such a unique stadium in that sense. It's not on the outskirts of a city where there's tons of space to redevelop. It's been a real challenge for the previous ownership in this one. So I'm interested to hear your thoughts, because I don't personally feel that if Chelsea are going to move out Stamford Bridge, the Earls Court idea I don't think is an awful one. I think it's actually a very viable one. Actually makes sense when you look at it, because it doesn't take Chelsea out of their local area. It maintains, I think, a lot of what Chelsea is. I know we all love Stamford Bridge. I would love to stay in Stamford Bridge for the rest of time, right? And if that can be done, but if it turns out that maybe it makes more sense, and maybe it actually means that Chelsea can have a great farewell to Stamford Bridge but then move into a stadium that's local, is that the worst thing in the world? Let me know your thoughts. Football starting this weekend. Although Chelsea's pre-season fixtures have ended, we are now going into that week heading up to the first Premier League game, so I'm sure I'll be talking more, and we'll see what happens on the Moises Caicedo thing, right? As I keep saying every single video, it doesn't seem to be dead yet. So let's hope. Those are my thoughts. Follow me on Twitter at SonOfChelsea, and I'll see you again very soon. All the best.